One, two, three, blah. Biddy boop bop beep bop bop. Dee 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 doo. Do 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 do. I'm very tired, so get off my back already. Hey everybody, um, how are you? Good. Picks of the week. So I've been very broke lately with no immediate relief to that. I got paid today, so I was hoping I'd be able to pick up the entirety of my bag, but alas, I was not. I did manage to pick away at it some more though, and I've been very busy lately, and so I've had no time to read. How I can be so busy and yet be so broke. Here we are. Anyway, first up this week, Primordial #1. This is another new book by Jeff Lemire. The guy has just been nonstop for going on 15 years now, I want to say. And this is another collaboration with Andrea Sorrentino, an Italian artist. So I don't know what this is about. I feel like it's because you got a Leica the dog or whatever the cosmonaut dog was and monkeys and stuff. So I feel like this is going to be a space race thing where the chimps etc. that we sent up there come back intelligent. Not completely like Manhattan Projects by Jonathan Hickman and Nick Dragata mind that for story, but that was just one aspect of it. This looks like it'll focus on it. Also, I am quite literally judging a book by its cover, so I could be completely off the mark there. It really doesn't matter because Lemire and Sorrentino are the big draw. I say that not having finished Gravity. Gravity Falls is a children's cartoon. Ugh, I gotta look that up. Anyway, back in, I want to say around 2013, 2014, Lemire and Sorrentino teamed up on uh, Green Arrow. Sorry, I completely forgot what I was doing there for a second. Green Arrow is, of course, the. I gotta just find this title before I do anything else. Gideon Falls. Okay, so Green Arrow is, of course, the old DC character who I believe Marvel ripped off with Hawkeye, if not the other way around. I'm pretty sure Green Arrow was first, but he's essentially DC's Hawkeye, or Hawkeye is Marvel's Green Arrow, however you want to look at it. And Green Arrow has always been a character that I've liked in a book that I've read and enjoyed. I haven't, I'm not a DC guy as such, but there was, of course, the groundbreaking series Green Arrow, Green Lantern by Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams in the 70s. And I have that run, or I have reprints of it anyway, because it's a classic. It was, at the time, it was heralded like critically because they did a storyline where Speedy, who was Green Arrow's sidekick, turns out is a junkie and stuff like that. It was a very socially conscious book. Denny O'Neil is very liberal and very vocal about it, and so he wrote Green Arrow. Oliver Queen, the Green Arrow, even though he's a wealthy philanthropist, he's also a raging, bleeding heart liberal himself. So that's how Denny O'Neil wrote him, and then he wrote Green Lantern to be kind of Hal Jordan to be kind of the opposing side, a very more conservative military man and stuff like that. And I guess that's how it works. The Hal Jordan that I grew up with was kind of neutral. Well, the Hal Jordan I grew up with went insane. So, yeah, 6 to 1, half a dozen the other. So there's that. There was Kevin Smith, the filmmaker Kevin Smith, wrote a series called Green Arrow, which I think kind of retconned a lot of things. I enjoyed it, although I couldn't tell you a single thing about it now. And I remember reading other nerds being like, "Oh, he just ignored all this other meh," which isn't unlike Kevin Smith to do anyway. There was a Green Arrow Year One series in the 2000s, I want to say, written by Andy Diggle, which I liked a lot. Andy Diggle doesn't seem to write a whole lot anymore. I think he also wrote Green Arrow for a long time. And in fact, I think they named a character on the TV show after him. There was a character on Green Arrow, or Arrow, it might have just been called Diggle, and that was named after Andy Diggle. Andy Diggle was a favorite writer of mine because did he write The Losers? Yeah, I think The Losers is what got me into him. And then I bought everything that he pretty much everything after that he wrote. But I think he's like a TV writer now, so he doesn't need it anymore. And then finally in 20 geez, it might have even been like 2011 or 2012. DC did a hard reboot as they do every few years. This one was called The New 52. And I don't remember. I think Andy Diggle actually might have written that. Might have been his run, but I took a pass on it because I wasn't really into the New 52. But I did. I mean, there were a number of those books that I did buy. And Green Arrow, and eventually Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino took over his creative team, and that was when I started buying it. And I bought it because Jeff Lemire is one of my favorite writers, but Sorrentino is an incredible artist. It's hard to describe, and there's another. I gotta try to remember. I'll do it at some point. Um, there's another artist the artist who drew Superman Tarzan, which was a DC Dark Horse crossover in the early 2000s, I want to say, perhaps even the late 90s, puts me in mind of Sorrentino, combined with, I can't pull anybody's names today. I've had a day. Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino also did the series Gideon Falls, not Gravity Falls, which I own. I bought the first arc, and then I quit working at the shop I used to work at, so I had to drop a lot of stuff. I bought the second trade, and I think there's only one more, or there might be three more trades. So I'm not caught up on that, and it's not, I don't mean it to be a criticism of the book, but clearly I wasn't into it enough to keep it going. And it's very good, Gideon Falls, and I'll finish it eventually, but I'm more excited for this, to be honest with you, because I think just the overall vibe of it is for me. The other pick of this week is a bit of a nostalgic fare. This is Fantastic Four this is number 35, but the legacy numbering is 680. I don't know what volume it is. Back when I was a kid and I started collecting comics, there is in most comics there's an indicia. There's most books really, which has all the publishing information. And Marvel comics especially, DC would do this sometimes I think, but it was a non-issue because I wasn't collecting DC comics when I was a kid. This is volume 5 according to my list of the Fantastic Four. Volume 5, number 35. I would consider it just volume 1, number 680. This is the 60-year anniversary of Marvel's first family, and I couldn't be more pleased. And look at you got the Thing from the early 90s when he had a mask for a while there because his face got even more disfigured. You got Spider-Man in his Future Foundation uniform. You got Wolverine in his own Fantastic Four uniform. You got the Gray Hulk wearing a shirt and tie from when he was in the Fantastic Four in the early 90s for about 10 seconds. You got She-Hulk back here, but she was on the team in the 80s. You even got Scott Lang, the Ant-Man. Actually, it's Scott Lang. So yeah, it's been 60 years since August of 1961. I think, or actually, I think they timed it so that it came out on the stands the same month as it did back 60 years ago. But what else can I say? The Fantastic Four are one of my favorite. At this point, really anything mainstream Marvel, I've been a big fan of for a long time. Like when I started collecting comics again, I was only kind of like I had been in high school buying some superheroes here, some superheroes there. And then once I started working at a shop, and then it was just, I got everything. So all the major Marvel books I have complete runs of from at least 05, I want to say. And I mean, a complete run of the Fantastic Four would be nearly impossible with my budget in this economy, but so I mean, it's an oversized $10 issue. I'm sure there will be plenty. Oh, I was getting into the whole Indisha thing. I guess I don't really have to do that now. But this is something I think I may have mentioned this, and that it does kind of bother me that these days, I want to say, yeah, it was the late '90s when Marvel ditched the original numbering of all their books. I think that was largely because they were just trying to do a complete overhaul because the industry had crumbled essentially. The Marvel themselves had gone bankrupt, and they were just really at that point trying to throw anything at the wall and see if it stuck, and little of it really did. But I mean, the thing of it was then, and I mean, I wasn't collecting comics actively then, so I don't even know. But for all they know, it could have been the end of it all. So they were just like, well, the hell with it. We're going to start everything over. So they had a big uh, event called Onslaught, which I still haven't read, where in the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers all die. I don't remember how exactly that worked, but it was kind of like, to my recollection, it was kind of as an aside to the reader, like they're not really dead, but the Earth thinks they're dead. Like the world has mourned them, and which they did with the X-Men, like in the late '80s. So they just like, oh, we'll do that again, and so they killed them all off. They started the books all over at number 1, and I guess it was called Heroes Reborn, which was Jason Aaron. The Jason Aaron series of this year was a callback to that, Heroes Reborn. And so I'm assuming again it was a like an alternate dimension. And the big, I'm trying to think now. I don't remember if like none of that is considered canon at this point. I don't think Onslaught that happened, but none of the aftermath of it really matters anymore. And then I think it was Heroes Return when they did bring all those characters back into mainstream Marvel continuity. That was when they got Rob Liefeld to draw Captain America and Jim Lee to draw the Fantastic Four, and a bunch of like guys like that. Those two especially had very publicly quit Marvel Comics to co-found Image Comics along with a bunch of other Marvel artists. So them coming back to Marvel, not even it was only like 7 or 8 years later, was kind of a big deal. And then they just went back. So, but then it seems like ever since then, because then they started Heroes Reborn, they started everything at number 1 again, and then with Heroes Return, they did it was only a few months later. They're like, oh nope, that Heroes Reborn, forget about that. Heroes Return is where it's at, and so then everything started over, and it didn't really, like I say, like once they brought the characters back, they just kind of moved along as though nothing had happened, which is not uncommon in funny books at all. And then ever since then, they just will occasionally start everything over at number 1. I think it might have been because I mean DC had done that in the '80s, and then like I mentioned before, they do a pretty hard reboot pretty regularly, where they'll start everything over at number 1 again too. But even like DC, they started Superman over, but they didn't start Action Comics over, and then they finally did. They didn't start and then when it got to when Action Comics got to 1,000 issues all told, then they put the numbering back at 1,000 a couple of years ago. It's a big mess, and as a comic book collector, it makes my list look a fright. So yeah, I mean it's kind of a thing. I think that I've always assumed that the kind of psychology behind it was people are not going to want to buy Fantastic Four number 680 because they're going to go, Jesus, I got to read 679 more. Forget about it. But if they started over at number 1 and then people see, like, I mean, this is number 35, but you take my meaning. Because number 35, people go, oh, I only have to read 34 others. Which seems, honestly, though, seems really stupid because, at this point especially, like this might have made sense back in like the mid-aughts when I really started to notice that comics were really more being sold as trade paperbacks. The collections were much easier to get. You can get them at Barnes and Noble and stuff like that. And people didn't want to go to the comic book store every week, and you know, the excitement of getting new comics every week is lost on most people. which is fine. The excitement of a lot of stuff is lost on me too. Um, so at this point, it feels to me like if that's still the psychology they're going for, they want people to be able to jump on, is to sell the trades that way. This is the newest one. Well, how do I know that from? It doesn't matter. You don't collect these things. And then they can put Fantastic Four. The next issue should be number 681, and then I can just start numbering them from number 1. That's just how I see it. It's not like it's like I say. It's really more of a nerd thing, but it doesn't like keep me up nights. But at this point, it just feels silly to have 2 numbers on these covers. What do I know? It's Pixel Week. No, Pixel. So I only got to read the 3 I picked for last week because, like I say, I've been very, very busy lately, but they were good. So we will go in reverse order. First up was Search for Who. This was pretty good. You know what this, and this is going to sound, I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, but it's a big, dumb action movie of a comic book. Very thin premise it's essentially a revenge story. We have our main character here. He's a veteran of the Afghanistan war. He comes home. His parents, there's an attempt on his parents' life. Some bad guys try to blow up their bar and or shoot up his parents. And turns out his parents have long been associates of Chinese crime families. That happens, right? So, so now their son has to go after the bad guys and wipe them out before they kill his parents, and that's all I need. I don't need a whole lot more. It's really good stuff though, and I'm not. Well, Steve Orlando, I know his name, but let me see. I mean, it was a quick read. I'm on the fence about picking up more. Okay, so John Sway and Steve Orlando are credited as writers here. Steve Orlando, oh, he wrote Undertale. That wasn't very good. Oh, he wrote The Midnighter and Midnighter in Apollo. I do remember that. And I think I read his Martian Manhunter. I think I'm always getting Steve Orlando confused with Joe Orlando, and they're not the same person at all. So Steve Orlando is more of like a comics guy, and then John Sway has a couple comics written, but it looks like he's still. I would, yeah. This is definitely a collaboration, and it does again feel like one of those things where they're like, well, if you get Orlando on board, that'll help move the book, and yeah, they're probably right. The art's really good, and it was just like the kind of, and also it's an all Asian cast, which I'm honestly, I mean, I know I look like one of those guys who's really into Asian cultures, but I'm not. Beyond like Bruce Lee movies. Was that racist for me to say? Probably. But I do I like, and I've said this for sure before on here, is that I like representation in media. I don't have any real kind of problem with it, even beyond just being bleeding heart. I just kind of, frankly, sick of stories about me. When I was in my 20s and 30s, even I couldn't get enough. Every book, movie, TV show, comic that I consumed was aimed at me. The protagonist was somebody that I could relate to, and I think I finally reached a point where, yeah, it's like, all right, I mean, I still do read a lot of comics like that and stuff, but the variety of it, I enjoy. I think once I just started, and it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't like I was completely had my head up my ass my whole life. I've always tried to be inclusive. I've always tried to have an open mind. It's a very punk rock ethos by which I live my life. But there's all still was a lot of pig headishness and a lot of reluctance to change, which is just blah. So like, it's a big dumb action movie, but it's a big dumb action movie with Asian characters for a change. So like, yeah, I'm on board for that. That'll be fun. I guess that's all I really have to say about that one. But like, the Good Asian is another. The Good Asian's probably a clearer example because the Good Asian is a very specific genre. It's hard boiled detective noir. Takes place during the Depression era, right, or early World War II. Uh, it's got sex and violence. It's got everything that a traditional noir has, except that all the primary characters are Chinese or Chinese American. So I'm like, yeah, that's great. That's another angle on that very old entire genre that I still dearly love. But that's a new angle on it. So I'm like, oh, I don't read stories. So this is like a similar thing, although the sort of 70s, 80s revenge flick vibe that they're going for here, probably not as clearly defined as noir, but you get it. Also this week, I read May's book #1 by the aforementioned Jeff Lemire. This was fun, but a very quick read. I also feel like that's on me. When I picked this up, I was like, oh, this is a lot thicker. And then I look at the cover price, and I'm like, oh, $6. That's only $2 more than your average comic. But yeah, it does read kind of quick. This is another problem that I constantly have, though, is, and especially with comics, is I just read really fast. I got a lot of shit to do. I don't have time. But yeah, when you take your time, especially because Lemire does a lot of work with watercolors and stuff like that, that's really nice to look at. I mean, this fading sequence, brilliant. And he hasn't drawn a whole lot lately. I'm trying to think of the last thing. Is it Underwater Welder? That can't be right. Well, that's right. He did do the Sweet Tooth miniseries from like last year. But yeah, he doesn't draw as much anymore. He writes a lot more stuff. But he started out drawing everything that he wrote. So this is really fun. This is well, fun. I don't know if that's the word. It's a very sad story about our main character here, who we find out over the course of the story, his daughter apparently passed away at the age of 11 under sort of mysterious circumstances, and he's a building inspector, so he's just going through his day trying to just get through the grief that he's still mourning his daughter, and but his memory of her starts to fade, and then suddenly the plot thickens. I don't want to spoil anything, so I don't think it'll be. It feels like it's only a couple issues long. This, but yeah, it's good, and it's very good. Lemire is very good at that sort of thing, at the very sort of heartfelt, uh, sentimental stuff. But it's not cloying, or I don't find it anyway, cloying or overdone. I think he does it just right. It's usually, and this is again talking about appealing to your audience, the main characters are usually these stoic, uh, sad men who, really try to fight. Like Sweet Tooth had a character like that. Most of, yeah, if not all of the Essex County trilogy had that. Especially with his own stuff. Royal Family, I think, was the last. Oh, Family Tree, but I don't think he drew Family Tree. I want to say Royal Family was the last thing. I think that's what it's called. It might just be called the Royals. I gotta look it up now. Royal Family, Royal City. Is that right? That doesn't sound right either. Yeah, I think it is Royal City actually. Royal City was, now that I'm thinking about it, the last book that Jeff Lemire wrote and drew, and it was a very Jeff Lemire book where it all revolved around one family who one of the children had died young, and then so we're kind of seeing the rest of the family as time has moved on, and yeah, a lot of that sort of thing. I think I had a point that I think I probably passed a while ago, but that's fine. And then finally, Kazar, Lord of the Savage Land #1. This was really good. This was exactly what I was hoping it would be, and I'm probably more excited about this as far as Marvel Comics go than I am near about anything. Why exactly? I don't know. I think I've just been kind of in the mood for jungle adventure, but I had forgotten that during the Empire event of last year that Kazar died and then was brought back to life by the Savage Land. So that's where we start. I don't remember. I remember it was the Kotati who were the Empire, if you'll recall, started out as there's been the Kree Skrull War. It's been going on for years. They finally uh, have achieved peace, so now they're united under Emperor Hulkling, who is half Kree and half Skrull, and they fought the Kotati, who were this other alien race of vegetation type aliens that were trying to take over Earth. And so while fighting the Kotati, Kazar succumbed. And then I don't remember how he comes back, but he comes back from the grave and he doesn't quite know what to do with himself. And now he also finds himself even more. I think it's something to do with the Savage Land itself brought him back, and so now he's connected to the Savage Land in such a way that he can detect everything. But there's weird stuff going on. So he's married to Shanna the She Devil, and she has, I think she might have died and come back too. She's been around for a long time, and they have a son whose name is Matthew, who I don't remember from before, but I haven't read a ton of Kazar comics, if I'm being honest. And so there's something weird going on with that kid. But really, it's this. It's kind of cool that they give Kazar a title again now. It's been like 20 years, I want to say, but where a lot of readers probably aren't super familiar with him, he's also kind of unfamiliar with him now too. So a lot of this book is him going, like, I don't know how I'm able to do all this stuff. Join you, won't me? And then that way we'll know, we'll find out. But yeah, really good, fun jungle adventure stuff, and I'm into it. And that's been picks of last week. I am so tired that I'm going to stop doing this now. Goodbye. Just for now. I'll be back.